Hey, nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Did you buy Zoom shares before the?
No, I didn't. I'm sure I haven't really looked, but I'm sure they've done quite well for themselves and it's well deserved. So
Yes, they really rose up to the
rose to the
situation.
challenge. Yeah.
Yes,
I mean, because it could have the whole thing could have easily broken under the strain, but
absolutely.
they were well positioned and they pulled it off. And now they're a household word, and schools all over the world are dependent on them. And it's a beautiful thing. It's what it looks like when business works.
Hmm. Okay, people still joining.
I see we have two of you.
Yes, of course. There's a famous book in translated from German, I think, but in Hebrew it's called Double Aura.
Ah, so you
How appropriate,
always have
yes,
to be two of you.
at least. Okay, 1 minute to go and we'll start. So I'll ask again, is there anybody here who's okay with Zoom or good with Zoom and feels like helping us admitting people from the waiting room?
We expect them to continue arriving after we begin. Why, here's one now.
Yeah. And it would be helpful.
If you are good with Zoom, you can indicate that by raising your hand.
Mm-hmm.
Good with Zoom and willing to help, that is.
Okay, we'll manage anyway.
We'll do our best. Hopefully folks won't get left in the waiting room too long. Those who are good with Zoom probably know that they've changed their security stuff in the last few weeks. So.
Yes. Okay, I think it's 6 o'clock and so we'll begin. Welcome everybody to part 19 of the series, What Makes Our Inner Work Work? And joining me today, I'm very, very pleased to say, is Tim Kelley again. Today we'll be talking, it seems, about advanced and lovingly radical inner work. And perhaps
Indeed
other
we will.
things. Yes. So welcome again to those here with us in the Zoom room. You're welcome to join if you're watching on Facebook. And welcome to those who will probably be watching this later on YouTube and other places. You're very welcome to write in the chat room. We'll try to follow that. Questions, thoughts, whatever. We'll be very glad to hear what you have to say. Another
If you direct a
request.
question at me, write it in English, please.
Yes, or else I'll translate. So Hebrew
Thank
is
you.
also okay. I just want to remind you to stay muted unless we're talking with you specifically. Otherwise, it's really problematic. And also, it's very nice to see some of your faces on video. But if you're doing stuff and walking around or driving or moving around, it can
Putting
be,
on mascara. Mm-hmm.
yes, or cleaning your ears, then it might be somewhat, kind of,
Distracting.
distracting. Yes, that's the word I was seeking. So if you are doing something like that, then better turn off your video. Okay. Thank you all very much for joining us. And Tim, you're, of course, countless things, and you've been doing a lot of fascinating things for the past, I don't know how many years. But amongst them, you're an international agent of change and a thought leader on new paradigm systems and methods. And you've worked with many top leaders and in many fields and countries, right? And Tim has trained many consultants, over 1,000 coaches and therapists and leaders, and wrote a book about true purpose, a very interesting and good book. And would it be fair, Tim, to say that you really get a kick out of redesigning and evolving society?
I do, and I'd like to do much more of it than I have so far. So I have big plans, but yes, I think I spend much more time than the average person thinking about how to redesign society, and much more time than the average person trying to redesign society. So yes, that would be fair to say.
Cool. Is there anything else you'd like to say about yourself as a way of allowing people to get to know you a little bit more?
Yeah, I cook a lot. I spent this weekend making pineapple guava preserves and fig preserves. And it's fall, so those are the fruits that are available. Soon I'll be getting into persimmons. So yeah.
You should all know that Tim's jams and preserves are a legend. Alas, you can't come here with some jam soon.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else you've been up to lately that you'd like us to know about? I'd like to know about anything you've been up to.
Well, haven't been flying as much as usual. Lately, I've been up to seeking to eradicate slavery. I'm in the very early stages of that project. I mean, there's lots of people who are not in the early stages of who are working on that full time. I'm not suggesting that that there's not something going on around it. There's a lot going on about trying to eradicate slavery. I'm new to that whole project and hoping to bring some not quite sure how to say it, intervention design strategic thinking into how to go about that, because it's a significant and growing problem, and there are slaves pretty much everywhere in the world. There are slaves in Israel, there are slaves in the US, there are slaves in Europe, places where you wouldn't think there would be people being bought and sold. There are.
So true. So fingers crossed for that project.
Wish me luck.
I do. I wish us all. Okay. So last time Tim scolded me for not saying anything about myself. So this time I've prepared.
Encouraged.
Yes, encouraged. I'm joking, of course. Okay. So I've also been doing lots of stuff, but for now, let me say that I've been teaching voice dialogue and shamanic work and dream work and healing of the personal past and collective work and some other things that I've been teaching, as I said, for over 20 years. And I've been doing work with myself for over 30 years now. And I've also written the only Hebrew book about voice dialogue, which many of you perhaps know, The Demon, the Nun, and the Magical Child, A Journey to the Selves Within Us. And really, I really, really love to live and to explore consciousness and life, and to develop ways of healing and transformation, and to really, I'm fascinated by the exploration of what is possible for human beings, for myself, for humanity. And that's what I do a lot. Most of my time is devoted to that, I would say. We'll get to the chat in a second and see what you've been writing there. I'll say a little bit more. My way, the way that I live and teach, is called Flowering Diamond Way. And I once wrote a few lines about it, and perhaps I'll read them because I think they're somehow pertinent to our topic. Okay, Tim? So Flowering Diamond Way is not a school, it's not a center, and certainly not a destination. It is a continuously evolving way, a flowering again and again, an ever-changing drawing. It is a way meant to make flowering possible, to originate and support flowering. It combines the hardness, resilience, clarity, and stability of the diamond and the vitality, softness, fruitfulness, charm, and magic of the flower as it blossoms. It enables those who are called to it to find their unique way to their unique flowering as they explore and experience new ways to transform, develop, and expand for themselves and for a world seeking regeneration. So I think that gives, in a way, more than if I said, more practical things about what I do. It's kind of more the essence of what I do. Thank you. So let's see what's in the chat before we move on. So Yonit asks, what do you mean by slavery? Can I understand a bit more? Would you like to say a bit more about that, Tim?
Yeah, so the folks have had to work on the definition, because when they come up with a definition, the people who are into slavery try to come up with some way of working around it. Like they'll come up with legal contracts and stuff like that. But fundamentally, a person who cannot leave or cannot quit a job is a slave, right?
Yeah.
And I mean, the more fundamental, more obvious, more traditional one is when people are being bought and sold, right? But modern slavers make it look sort of they make it look more legitimate by, like, get a contract with the person, and then you get the person under your control, and then you sell the contract and move the person. And they're usually taking folks from the poorest of the poor places in Africa and South Asia and these sorts of things, where they're not very legally sophisticated and don't understand that they have rights, and then just taking advantage of them. Or from China, bringing them to other places and keeping them in sweatshops or brothels or restaurants or something like that. But really, fundamentally, it's a compromise of someone's free will, right? If you can't quit your job and move to another house when you want to, you're a slave.
Absolutely. And really, thank you for doing the work about in this regard. Somebody else asks, will there be a recording? Yes. And where will it be? I will send it to you. And how did you meet?
That's a good question.
Would you like to say something about that?
I can remember our first conversations, but I don't remember our meeting. I don't
I
remember
do.
how we met, Aura. Please.
Well, I think maybe that
I
would
think I can
perhaps.
remember conversation number 2 and conversation number 3. I don't remember
Uh-huh.
conversation number 1.
Yes, well, maybe I don't either. It's difficult
Mhm,
to say because if we don't remember it,
mhm.
you know, then. Anyway, but just to answer it very very briefly, we met. I think it must have been 2009 or 10, and we met mainly in regards to doing work that had to do with the collective. So some of you know about that, and perhaps we'll devote a different show to that sometime. So uh, let's get to our topic: advanced and lovingly radical inner work. Uh, and you're all welcome to say what your feelings about this topic are. Um, Before we begin, Tim, I think we've both been using voice dialogue, for example, for many years. So for us, it isn't radical or lovingly radical,
No.
but it still is radical in a way, isn't it?
Yeah, I just did some on Saturday with a guy, and afterwards he was like, "Wow, that was weird."
Yeah. And by the way, tomorrow I'm starting a workshop on Zoom, naturally. And since it's on Zoom, and if anybody wants to join us, then you can still write me an email or something, and we'll see what can be done. But what I meant about radically loving voice dialogue is, for example, the fact that one of the essences, I would say, of voice dialogue is that you can, and it would be very good for you if you accept and love very, very strange parts of yourself or inner voices of yourself. So, you little by little, when you do voice dialogue, you find out that accepting very extreme inner selves is very, very healing, for example, or makes you very much more complete, I should say.
Yeah, I would add that these days I hear a lot of folks advocating for self-love and saying you should love yourself and wouldn't it be great to love yourself and this sort of thing, which I completely agree with. That's a
Mhm.
wonderful thing. Um, but but as an instruction, love yourself lacks detail.
Yes.
And so it's most folks have a mixture of feelings about themselves, just like they do about everybody else. But especially when people start to work on themselves very early in their self work, usually that's driven by a negative reaction to oneself. There's something about themselves that they want to change, and that gives them the motive to take one of your workshops or read a book or get a therapist or something like that, because they observe a feature or behavior or habit or something that they're doing that they want to change. Perfectly natural. And then as they discover more about themselves, then they become even more in negative reaction to themselves. Ugh, yuck. Oh my God, I didn't know I was doing that. Also perfectly natural, which then creates more negative feelings about oneself and therefore more motivation to change and therefore more motivation to take workshops, buy self-help books, et cetera, et cetera. All completely natural. And that drives a lot of people forward in their consciousness work, but it can only drive you so far because, as you well know and teach, Aura, that, that many of the parts will not respond to negative judgment as a motive for them to change. And
Hmm.
so the instruction, love yourself by itself, wonderful high level strategic instruction, but lacking in details. And voice dialogue, like you, voice dialogue is just an amazing tool for putting that into action one part at a time. Okay, now I'm going to love this part of myself. Now I'm going to love this part of myself. Now, ooh, yuck. Oh, all right. Now I'm going to love this part of myself, I think. Um, and that really gets the job done in a way that looking yourself in the mirror and saying I love myself will not do.
I completely agree. That's my experience too. So this is kind of a radical base to both of our work, I would say. Disagree with me if you need to. But I wanted to go further than that. Further than voice dialogue, and ask you and myself as well, what is advanced work for you, and what is, whatever you have to say about advanced work in general, and about lovingly radical inner work.
Yeah. So let's deal first with the sort of variations on the voice dialogue theme, and then kind of build from there because we have a little time. So to me, the next step, once I've looked at some of the different features of my personality that maybe I don't like that much, and have practiced loving them rather than trying to change them, which can cause them to change, I would say there's kind of two different next steps for me in that. One is rooting around in the unconscious, looking for stuff I didn't know was there and seeking to find and love that. And that's a whole another realm down there, the stuff that we don't know about ourselves. And that's where we find the really weird stuff that you were talking about, the magical children and the priests and the demons and the nuns and all that kind of stuff is all in there. Just a question of how far down you have to dig to get to it. And in that sense, I as an individual, you as an individual are everything if you're willing to accept everything you encounter in the unconscious as yourself. The definition of self gets much broader. Absolutely. When you look at it that way. So that's my first thought in that direction. And then a second one is seeking to modify the parts, because the practicing loving the different parts of self doesn't necessarily mean that I don't want them to behave differently. I love my son, but sometimes I wish he would behave differently. And so that raises an interesting question. Okay, if I love this part of myself and accept this part of myself, how do I get it to behave differently without kind of retracting that love? In voice dialogue, you don't do that. You just keep loving the part. But I'm like, I still want to love it and change it. And out of that, Jeffrey Van Dyke and I developed this technique of finding the higher purpose of parts and asking the part, so, okay, this is your purpose, this is your behavior, do they match? And the answer is almost always no. Right. And so let's take something like an inner critic, for example, a part that people love to hate, right? The part that tells you all the time that you suck and you're ugly. And if people really knew you, they'd never want to have anything to do with you. People who pay you are wasting their money. This part that people just would love to just take a gun and shoot, right? So that part, if you find its higher purpose. So if you tell that part, stop criticizing me, it'll just get louder. If you try to ignore it and get rid of it, it'll just get louder. Like you can't make it stop. But if you find its higher purpose and ask it, are you living true to that purpose? The part will almost 100% of the time say no, which creates the opportunity for the part to change its own job description because it doesn't believe that its behavior aligns with its purpose, which is a completely different motive than changing because you would like it to change. So that's another one of my really kind of fun next steps, just a little beyond the voice dialogue realm, right? That's not fair play in voice dialogue to do that, but okay, it's not voice dialogue. I still like doing it.
Absolutely. Me too. And it's always very interesting to see that many people who do a lot of work even reach similar things. We all know it because I also at some point in my exploration started you know, talking with parts and discussing with them possibilities of change. Is this really working for you, and what could we do different? And little by little, it developed in the direction that Tim is talking about, kind of changing the way the part functions in our life. And also sometimes I've seen some miraculous occurrences when I managed to discover with myself or with others something like I would call it perhaps the noble noble aspect of the part. So this is even perhaps, you know, kind of, it's not only would you agree to change a job and what job would that be, but sometimes you can find an even higher essence. So these are fascinating possibilities to explore. Actually, I'm going to teach that in November, Tim, to more advanced students. But I wanted also to say that you said earlier that once we start looking at ourselves more and more deeply, it seems it's as if our self expands. And for me, to my great, very, very great surprise, little by little, it became almost as if I was a universe. And the expansion just keeps growing. And this for me is one of the things that I could call lovingly radical. There is usually, not always, but usually there is a goodness about it. It's for me, most of the time, it's not too you know, difficult, at least right now. In the past, it used to be different. But this, just imagine that perhaps you could see yourself as an entire universe. And this universe keeps growing, as universes tend to do, you know, and more stuff becomes conscious. And it can be naturally more and more unfamiliar, you know, more and more extreme in a way, or surprising in a way. And yet everything like that I managed to accept, to know, to have a relationship with, to love, has a huge impact on the quality of my life if done in a safe and you know, wise way. And it really transforms us, and it has it affects day-to-day life. It's not only, you know, something very weird and odd, some kind of unrelated exploration. No, it changes the way I am right here, right now, and the way I am when I go to do my shopping, and the way I am when I relate to my cat, and so on and so forth. So this, on the one hand, is very odd and extreme and the radical thought, at least to a certain degree. And yet, if we build a good base, this becomes an option, and we can start playing around with it and seeing how it affects our life here in this body. And that's fascinating for me. And you know, I keep poking Tim in old diaries of mine for all sorts of reasons. I find it very revealing, and very often something just pops up, you know, seemingly just you know, by chance, but it's very often very telling. And something popped up a few days ago from 2007. And there was a sentence there that went like this. I was told, wherever you wish to go, is only a starting point. I'll say that again. Wherever you wish to go is only a starting point. And I think today I understand that so much more than I did in 2007 when I said, yes, of course, you know, kind of, yeah, it makes sense. I live like that. I'm an explorer, I'm adventurous, you know, things like that. But I think right now is when I can really, really, really fathom this idea in depth, that the moment you do enough of your basic work, then it's like horizons open up, and it's just unending, the expansion that's possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think that, you know, we walk around limited by our beliefs of what's possible and what we're capable of. And so we can only see several steps ahead on the path. And then when you get there, suddenly you can see more. So I like to treat the process of walking the path or of seeking to live your purpose sort of like the metaphor I use is crossing a stream in a fog, where there are stones about 1.5 meters apart and you can see 2 meters. So you can see one stone, maybe on a good day, 2 stones, and you don't know, that could be it. That could be the last stone and you're stuck, right? Or more frequently, you jump to the next stone and you can see further, and now you see a stone you couldn't see before. So there
Right.
seems to always be another step on the path. And the thing that looks like the ultimate, when you get there, it's like, oh, now I can see a new ultimate that I didn't know existed before.
True. Does anybody want to say something or ask something that has to do with this subject of very advanced work and how to get there, or lovingly radical work? You can write in Hebrew and I'll translate if you like.
Looks like Rotem might have wanted to say something out loud.
Yay! Hi.
Hi,
Hi,
Rotem.
Rotem. Yeah.
Yes,
we can hear you.
I enjoy listening to you. Thank you. And I'll ask about what Tim just said before about talking to the part that is parts that I don't like about me, like the judgmental parts or those, and trying to let them see how they really to ask them if they really do their thing, if what they do is what they aim to do, right? So I wanted to know how is this with the voice dialogue? How is this working? Because I think it's a different way, right? It's not the proper voice dialogue, but it's a different approach. I just wanted to hear more about it.
Great, Rotem. Thanks. Tim, would you like to answer that?
Those kids sound like they're having a lot of fun, Rotem, but when there we go. Thank you. Yeah, sorry, I was muted there for a second. No, it's not proper voice dialogue, because voice dialogue has a restriction against trying to change parts. And it's with very good reason, because it's easy for, so if someone comes to me and says, oh, Tim, I want you to do voice dialogue with this part of me, there's a 90% chance that they want me to change that part, right? And that's the goal in voice dialogue, is to learn to know, love, and accept all the parts. And trying to change the part is not a communication that I know you, I love you, and I accept you. Now change, right? That's that's not how that works. In fact, trying to change the part will mostly just piss it off usually, and not cause it to want to do anything differently. So the restriction is motivated by good reasons. Nonetheless, just can't help myself, had to figure out a way to work around it. So if I love the part and if I accept the part, it's possible still to change it in the following way. I'll be a little bit more specific about what I said before. Okay, so, and this is, again, this is a technique that Jeffrey Van Dyke and I developed together. So now if I ask the part what its purpose is, it doesn't know. But there's kind of a repetitive, just like a person. If I ask someone on the street, what's your higher purpose in life? They're gonna be like, yeah, I don't know, be a good person, I'm not sure. That would be a normal response, right? There's a very small percentage of people who can answer the question, but most can't. Same thing with a part. If you say, so inner critic, what's your purpose? What are you trying to achieve? It's going to have trouble answering the question. But if it thinks about it long enough, it can sort of come up with an answer. And there's this cool repetitive questioning technique that you can use to really get to a higher purpose. But without knowing any of that, those of you who are trained in voice dialogue or active imagination know how to talk to your own parts. You could still ask the part, do you enjoy your job? Are you having fun? Are you achieving your goals? Those are questions that you can ask without any kind of advanced techniques. And this means you have to let go of your own desire for this part to change, irrelevant in the conversation. Now you've become a coach and the part has become your client, and you're trying to tell, is this part happy? Is it fulfilled? Does it enjoy its job? Does it think it's doing a good job? And if the answer to all those questions is yes, too bad, you're screwed. There's not much you can do. But often the part will say, well, yeah, but you know, I can see I'm causing this negative effect over here, but don't argue with me about it, right? Or it's too easy, you know, criticizing you isn't as much fun as it used to be because you can't defend yourself from me. Or it's much harder than it used to be. It used to be much easier to criticize you, and now it's really difficult. And so those are parts, those are different versions of the part expressing some dissatisfaction with the current state of affairs. And then you can offer to help the part solve its problem, right? Your desire for it to change doesn't care. It's feeling that it's not really expressing its gifts fully, or that it's bored, or that you're resisting it too much, or that maybe its job is causing some negative effects in your life. Those are things that it doesn't like. And that would create a, and you have to be careful not to be over eager, right? But if you can help the part adjust its job, that really the best way is if you can find the part's higher purpose, because that can lead to a completely radical change, what Aura is calling this noble essence, which can lead to a total change in behavior. But that's more complicated than we can teach in a short call like this. That's something that requires methodology and training to do. But just finding any dissatisfaction the part has with the current state of affairs and working together with it to figure out how it could improve its situation will create motivation in it for a change, which is the key.
So that's really a way that is, you know, it's you know, a very central to voice dialogue and any work that we do, really, that respects in a radical way the free will of a part, and not only the free will of a person, apropos slavery and stuff like that. So really, you can't make the parts change, but you can suggest, or you can offer, or you can, you know,
yeah, and you can't restrain them, you can't fire them, you can't restrict them from trying to do what they're trying to do. Ultimately, what you want is, and this gets to the next level, if you do this with enough parts, the thing that Aura and I are describing, if you do it with enough parts, it changes the internal configuration of the psyche. The way the parts normally operate looks kind of like the Knesset on a bad day. It's like and different factions of parts fighting with each other and throwing chairs and stuff, trying to get control, right? And trying to create coalitions so they can force you to do this or prevent you from doing that. And when some group of parts gets enough power to overpower some other group of parts temporarily, we call that a decision. It's a mess in there. And so, I mean, honestly, it's a miracle we can get anything done. And this is why after people make decisions, they then second guess themselves. That's the minority group of parts trying to get control again and trying to block the majority group of parts from getting its legislation passed, right, or implemented. So it's just this constant battle in there, and it's really not efficient at all. It works, right? We're all out there having relationships and doing our jobs and whatever, like we mostly survive and function miraculously. But if you do enough transformation of individual parts, it eventually creates this critical mass in the psyche where they start to behave like a collaborative team, right? And this is actually my vision for government, right? That we know we can create it inside people, and we know we can create it amongst people, like in a company. It's been done many times. You could have a government system that operates off a principle of respecting all parts of the electorate, of the Knesset, whatever, and all parts matter, all voices count, and we're going to create a win-win solution no matter what. You could absolutely do that. We know how to do it. And part of the place it starts is inside your own head. When all the parts are operating according to their higher purpose and yours, they all start to play well with others. And now it gets way quieter in your head. And those of you who are big time meditators, this saves you like 20 or 30 years of meditation. I kid you not, right? The amount of meditation you have to do to create that kind of inner quiet is a lot.
Right.
Cora, anything to add on this?
I think
Well,
the basic line is to actually give love to those parts is the base that is not
that's step one.
that step one is not as obvious for people, for like I think I'm thinking about my patients, and some of them are really sick people, and I think for them that would be the hardest part, right, as itself.
Yeah.
That's very true. Yeah. You know, I've been going through very, very extreme transformations lately. And I could see that even though I've been doing so much work all my life almost, or at least 30 something years, once in a while, there are still selves that come up, parts, and they're afraid of the change, or they're against change. And then they cause resistance. Now, you know, one way of dealing with it is just trying to go straight ahead, you know, and not doing anything about it. But it doesn't work that well. And
a colleague of mine, the one who created the collaborative operating system, calls that speed bumping.
Speed. Yes.
Just run right over him.
So I try not to do that as much as possible. But if you figure out that somebody is resisting this transformation that you're going through, and you talk with them, you figure out who that is and why they're resisting. Okay, why don't they want the transformation that seems to be happening or is becoming available? Then you can do a lot of very interesting things with these parts, beginning with classic voice dialogue to very, very advanced work with parts, which isn't classic voice dialogue already. And that, again, that works, and that sort of includes the part that is resisting little by little in the game. So they're not against it, but they manage to find their place within it usually.
Yeah, and they get to modify the plan to deal with whatever their concerns are. So now they no longer have to resist, and the plan gets better because now it deals with some possible eventuality or problem that it didn't before.
Mm-hmm. Right. And when, you know, when we're talking about lovingly radical in our work, then, you know, sometimes the expansion of our consciousness can be so surprising. No, I've been going through things once in a while during the past few years that I never heard of, and were, maybe somebody else did, but for me were, completely new and unheard of, and that naturally causes a lot of resistance, curiosity too. But then when you have a good base and a good relationship with your parts, and you know how to do the work, whatever is necessary, and you're flexible enough with your work, then you just manage to rise to the challenge again and again. And then suddenly you can find yourself in a very, very different, I would also almost say, in a very different type of world, life. It's really like you're still here in body and you do the dishes and everything, but at the same time you're already in a completely different universe in a way, which is so much nicer. Believe me, it's amazingly, highly recommended to try to go there without being negative about regular life, or without feeling that if you don't attain that, then there's something wrong. But I just feel again and again lately that people need to know that very amazing things are possible. Yeah. And you still stay, sort of normal,
Mostly,
yeah, we're kind of weird in a way, perhaps, but also extremely normal and very highly functioning human beings, both Tim and I. And most people who do a lot of voice dialogue are very, very well functioning people. There are all sorts of exceptions, but generally speaking, so it really makes you very, very expanded little by little if you want to go there, but also very anchored in your body, in this reality. And then you can fly, and you can dare. And that again, is a kind of lovingly radical work. And one last thing about that before we look at the chat room again, or if you have anything to add, Tim, is that again, I feel it necessary, and I know it might sound a bit preachy, so I'm really, really sorry if it does, but I just want people to know that life can be much, much better. And each part of you that you get to know, whether you're a beginner or intermediate or whatever, or you've done tons and tons of work, is really life-changing. And the change is kind of, it's not only for ourselves, it's firstly for me, but then it reflects on all our relationships little by little. It's a gradual thing. And I think that's, one of the basic ways to little by little do work that may have an impact in the world, because, it comes from extreme acceptance of what is. And from really accepting things and even loving them as they are, even when they're horrible, then things can grow and change and transform.
Yeah, that that kind of alteration of reality thing, I think that it's a lot of sages and religious teachers and advanced psychological teachers and stuff like that talk about this a lot, about the subjective nature of reality, and how much of what we see as fact and what we see as reality is an out projection of our own emotions, our own beliefs, and our own parts onto the screen of reality. And so when you change what's going on inside, you're changing the movie projector. So now a different movie is getting projected on the screen, and it looks very different.
Yes.
So you think about that like in a movie theater, the screen, it doesn't have a lot of features to it, right? But it looks like a battle in North Africa or a love story or whatever because of what's getting projected onto it. And in that situation, we all know, oh, well, the screen's just this white thing, right? Where that nothing interesting about that. All the action is what's being projected on it. We don't realize that reality, what we call reality, is much the same way. Most of the action, most of the stuff that you love or hate, that you're upset about, that you want to change, is actually projected, not part of the screen itself.
So true. And what, little by little may happen to people is that you kind of have we were joking about double aura earlier. You can find yourself, for example, having this double vision in a way, but it's a calm thing. So you can see the regular projection, that we're used to, in which there's I don't know, extinction or whatever, and pollution and wars and stuff like that. And then on top of it, or somehow superimposed on it, you begin to have your own version and your own reality. And somehow you can learn to make it work together. And this is quite amazing to experience. And again, all these things are things that are explored now. I'm sure we're not the only ones exploring them and experiencing them to this to some degree or other. But yeah, I really think things are becoming possible that were less so before. Going back to basics for a second, Yonit is asking if I or you are willing to give an example for how it might look when we manage to take a part that is resistant to change or to anything, and to make it a part of the whole and to include it. Do you have a good example for that, Tim?
Yeah. So I'm thinking of, I guess I don't have permission to talk about that one. It's very recent.
Okay.
let me think back a little farther. So I can tell you, I'll give you an example of something I've seen happen several times. I like to use the inner critic as an example, because even folks who aren't that familiar with working with parts can pretty easily identify the voice in themselves that tells them that they suck, right? They can, oh, that one. Yeah.
Yes.
I know that one.
And that they're bound to fail.
Right. You'll never amount to anything. So that part, I love working with those parts. They're very clever. They're very hardworking. They're up in the middle of the night. They take their job very seriously, these parts. And most people don't realize that they're actually there for protection, typically.
Mm-hmm.
And they develop when you're young, when you're 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, when you realize that if you don't watch yourself, you could wind up getting criticized by your parents or other powerful people who matter to you. So you better make sure you got your act together here, right? Better not make mistakes. And so now this part starts criticizing everything you do, so that you can correct these errors and flaws before someone else has a chance to criticize you. This is not always true, but it's a good sort of kind of middle of the bell curve version of how a part like this develops. And now, years later, it's gotten really good at its job. It has decades to practice and sharpen its knives, and it knows exactly where to poke you, where you can't defend yourself, right? The things that you're most sensitive about, where your self-esteem is lowest, it knows right where to hit. So we talk to a part like this, right? Or I would do something like this. We say, oh, so what's your goal? And the goal might say, well, for her to be perfect, or for her to never make mistakes, or something like that. But so okay, so if you achieve that, then what, right? We get into this whole dialogue about what the part's highest aspiration for you is. And the result of that is something like, and this is really random. It's really hard to tell in advance what this is going to sound like, but it's usually something like for you to have inner peace, or for you to be happy all the time, or for you to be a walking embodiment of love or something like that, which invariably comes as a complete surprise to me as the facilitator and to the person and to the part. The part's like, really? That's my purpose? And then I'll say, okay, so how's that going, right? Is stabbing her in her places where her self-esteem is lowest a good strategy for her to have inner peace? And the part's like, no. Say, okay, well, imagine for a moment that we could do something else that might be a better strategy. What might that look like? And get into a whole conversation about that. The result of which typically is the part will change its behavior permanently and start to behave something like a coach, right? Now, a coach might give you negative feedback some of the time, but it's not going to be super personal and nasty and insulting, right? But might say, you know, you could do better. You did this, this, and this. It didn't work. Next time you should do this, this, and this instead. That would be normal coaching, right? And that's okay. Or the part might say, you've got this. It's fine. Go get them, right? Or don't worry. It didn't work out. It's not a big deal. Keep going, right? The part just starts to behave like that, starts like being like a coach and a cheerleader instead of trying to tear you down and make every breath you take wrong, which is a huge change in the psyche. We're only talking about one part here, right? Could you imagine if just that one part changed its behavior from being constantly negative and critical to constantly trying to help you achieve what it was you wanted to achieve in the best way possible in a friendly, supportive way, right? With the goal of helping you be your best self. Imagine just that one part change. And there are dozens of these things, hundreds of these things, right? So that's one part, right? Now, and then, and here's how you know that there's misalignment. You're trying to do something, and if you're honest with yourself, you can see yourself sabotaging yourself and getting in your own way. Maybe you keep picking the same kind of guy, even though you know it's really not such a good idea, right? Or every time you get a certain amount of money, suddenly something strange happens financially and your net worth comes back down or something like that. These are the signs of misalignment, right? And so somewhere in there under the covers is some part, everything in your life that you don't like, for the most part, some part of you, including, by the way, sometimes diseases or injuries or car accidents, often, not always, often there's a part in there that if you ask, will say, yeah, that was me. So imagine if you could deal with all of that stuff so you don't have to keep repeating the things that don't work in your life, including the things that you don't know you're doing to yourself.
Perhaps another good example for that, and I'm going to go now back to basics. So we have the more advanced work, and let's go back to basics a little bit, is because the basics still works, you know, and
Sure.
we don't do everything.
Basic is the foundation.
Right. So, for example, some people have a very powerful perfectionist or things of that nature. And the moment, you know, one of the things that happened to me the moment I started doing voice dialogue with myself many 30-something years ago was that I think the first and biggest realization was, wow, there are all these parts and it's okay. And wow, each of them somehow has a kind of gift for me. So that's kind of really basic voice dialogue. So then if I took the perfectionist, which would, before I worked with it, would sabotage my work because everything I did needed to be perfect. So just imagine somebody sitting on your shoulder while you're writing or drawing or trying to have a love life or whatever, and somebody saying all the time, you have to be perfect. This isn't perfect. It should be more perfect. You know, very stressful and very sabotaging. But once you just manage to have a sort of relationship with this part, and you accept it as it is, and perhaps even love it, and you can, you know, these parts can sometimes be awe-inspiring because it's wow, you know, it's very, it's amazing to see how they are working and who they are. Then it might even just through your work with it and with other parts, opposing parts, soften enough to become something more like an advisor. Okay, an advisor on perfection, you know, and this is completely different, because then it's not jumping on you all the time and sort of taking control of your life, of your car, of your plane, of whatever it is you can imagine yourself driving, and it's just sitting there by your side, and once in a while it says, take a look here, it could be better. You know, so again, it's the same thing that Tim was talking about. Now, sometimes it's easier work and you can do it, you know, more simply. And sometimes you need to take the big guns out and to do much more advanced work. And then, you know, sometimes very, what's the word? Things that don't move for a long time.
Intractable.
Intractable. Okay, so intractable things can sometimes surprisingly start shifting and moving, and that's a great feeling.
Yeah.
Let's
Or
see.
imagine even if a perfectionist part would agree that perfection doesn't matter 100% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that you could tell it, okay, I need 50% perfection or 75% perfection, or now I'm working on my CV for an important job, right? Or first date with someone I've been after for years. Perfection's really important today. Can we, you know, dial it up, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Even if you could get the part to agree to that, that would be a huge gain.
Yeah. And our parts ourselves really like to be appreciated. So, you know, they want to be taken into consideration. They want to be
gainfully employed.
Yes, that's what they're there for. You know, they want
Give
to
them
do their
something to
work.
do.
Yeah. Right.
Good. Shall we deviate more into the stratosphere now, Aura?
Yeah, we have about 15 minutes to deviate into the stratosphere.
Okay, cool.
So whoever can stay with us a little longer, you're very welcome. So deviate away, Tim.
Yeah. So some of the most fun techniques, the really advanced, lovingly radical ones that I like to use, depend on this idea of a connection to some higher something that knows your purpose and can see your path better than you can.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on your beliefs, it could be external, like if you're a religious or spiritual person, it might be God or the universe or source or something like that. And or it could be internal, like my higher self or my soul or something like that, or my heart or my intuition. Doesn't matter what you call it. That's up to you. But if you accept the idea that there might be something that has a better view of your purpose and a better view of your path than you do, and you learn how to talk to it, which requires you to most people to deal with your fears of actually talking to such a thing, then a whole bunch of other fun stuff becomes possible. Because you can get such a thing, or even other parts of you sometimes, to go make modifications in your psyche that you wouldn't be able to do on your own. And this gets into very advanced stuff. You will not see this many places.
No, you won't.
Reading books and doing workshops. So let's say I wanted to clear all of my limiting beliefs, not 2 or 3 of them, all of them. Maybe I'm called to change the world and I can't afford limiting beliefs. That's too much limitation for me, hypothetically speaking. And I want to get rid of all of my limiting beliefs, and I don't have time to do it one at a time because there are probably hundreds or thousands of them lurking in my unconscious. So what if I could call on the universe or spirit or my higher self or something like that and say, hey, would you do me a solid? Would you do me a big favor and go in there and clear all of my limiting beliefs for me? Now, it's not quite that simple because we have to create the conditions under which I feel okay asking and it feels okay saying yes. And the other parts of me aren't all freaked out and aren't going to try to object and sabotage when this happens. But assuming everyone's relaxed and calm about this request, and my higher self or my soul or whatever it is says, sure, Tim, I'll do that for you. Glad you asked, right? Then I conduct a little ritual and I turn this sucker loose. And now maybe an hour, maybe 3 days, maybe a week later, all my limiting beliefs are gone. And we have seen this work over and over and over again. Or anything you want to throw in on that topic?
That's radical.
Yep. Or I want you to align all of my parts. Like I want you to go in there to the Knesset and teach them all to play well with others. Right? Would you do that for me? Right? Rather than dealing with the parts one at a time. Now, this doesn't work until you've actually done really good work with about half a dozen parts. You got to roll your sleeves up and get in there and learn how to love them, learn how to work with them, this kind of thing. But after you've done good work with enough parts, then you can ask this thing to go and do the rest for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And once again, you have to get enough permission, as Tim calls it. You can't do it by force. Forcing stuff doesn't work. It just
They just
causes,
start throwing chairs again.
And it causes a lot of trouble. But if you manage to get enough of your parts to say, to vote for this, and you work gently and you've done enough basic work, then all sorts of amazing things can happen, and who knows what else we are going to figure out in the future. So this is something that Tim developed, right, Tim?
Mm-hmm.
This option.
With the beliefs, it was with two other people, with Lion Goodman and Gina Maria Mele. The three of us co-developed the belief clearing method, which we call massive belief relief or sweeping the temple. And then I adapted that to do with parts. I was like, wait a minute, if this works with beliefs, it should work with parts too, right? And it did.
and this is so cool, because again, once you've done enough of the basic work and you really begin to understand how the system works, then you can invent stuff and you can be inspired by all sorts of things. You just find out more things that work for us, for humanity, for human beings. And then again, consciousness can expand even more, and people can heal faster.
One other thing I think we both have something to say about, or in the spirit of advanced radically loving work, would be core wounds.
True.
That the idea of actually transforming a core wound, I think, doesn't exist generally out there in the collective. As a goal, it does, but in terms of methodology, I think that you and I have had the experience of transforming core wounds in ourselves and others fully, which I think is relatively rare and maybe deserves a little talk.
Right. So perhaps you'd like to define a little bit what we mean by core wounds?
The thought had occurred to me. I think some people probably already have a pretty good idea just hearing the words, and some other people are like, huh? So this is kind of a Jungian view of the psyche, but in childhood, one of the ways we develop a personality and ego is in negative reaction to certain experiences. Right. So many people, if they think about it, can remember a time in their life that something was happening or something was going on that was really awful, that caused them to make long-lasting decisions. And it may have happened when they were very young, right? I've heard people talk about it happening at birth or within the first year. But typically, someone's a few years old and maybe your mom leaves, Or, very common one, a younger sibling gets born and somehow now you're not getting as much attention as you were yesterday, right? Or it could be really awful, like a rape or something like that, or a horrible car accident that people die in, a single event. Or it could be, as in my case, a long-lasting pattern of my dad criticizing me a lot. It could be anything. What distinguishes a core wound is your reaction to that event. And in reaction to it, inside you say, and this could be conscious or unconscious, this sucks. I hate this. I don't want this to ever happen again. I don't want to feel the way I feel right now ever again. And therefore, I'm going to, and this is where the ego formation part happens. I'm going to make sure everybody likes me. I'm going to be invisible. I'm going to be the best student in class. I'm going to learn everything. I'm going to be the strongest person and able to overpower anybody. You make some kind of decision, the result of which causes your personality to start to develop in a new direction. That event and all the stuff, the ramifications it has psychologically and emotionally, we call that event a core wound. Anything you want to add to that, Laura?
It hurts a lot.
Hurts a lot. It
Yeah,
sucks.
and yeah, and of course, even if we've managed to through this personality development to bury it very, very deep inside, naturally it affects every single thing that happens to us and our quality of life and everything, our relationships. And it's and unless we manage to get to it in a healing way, in a safe way, and to do things with it, it usually tends to stay that way, and usually it even gets worse and worse.
Yeah.
So
this stuff is typically and people can often, not always, but often remember the incident or the pattern. Not always. But what's unconscious is the emotions that got suppressed when it happened, and some of the parts that got created when it happened, and some of the beliefs that got created when it happened. So there's this whole clump of stuff, of negative beliefs about yourself, young wounded parts, and really, really, really unpleasant emotions, at least those three, all kind of clustered together deep in your unconscious, driving your motivation and your personality. Much of what you do is actually a result of those feelings and decisions. So people don't realize the reason they're getting out of bed every day, the reason they're going left and not right, the reason they're doing these different things is to make sure that they never feel that again. This is unconscious in their decision-making process. And when people have done enough therapy, or enough introspection, or enough coaching, or enough really deepening into their emotions, at some point they often start to bump into this stuff and realize, wow, I had no idea that so much of my energy goes into avoiding these particular emotions and experiences. And this is what we call being triggered, right? You're going along, everything's fine, and all of a sudden you're pissed or terrified or something, and suddenly your brain is on a single track, right? And you're gonna make sure that he this, or make sure that she doesn't that, or whatever, and you can't do anything else while you're in this state. And while you're in the state, you're sure you're right. And later you might be looking back going, what happened? But those reactions are those young wounded parts getting poked, and the whole psyche going into defense mode in response. That's what getting triggered is.
Right. And we're nearing the end of this meeting, and I wanted to say, take a look for a second into yourselves and just notice, how much do you believe that healing of core wounds, for example, or healing in general, is possible? And I'm asking this because I often feel that even in with people who are into healing, into therapy, into stuff like that, and have been doing it as therapists or healers or students or whatever for years and years, I feel that there is a belief that really deep and perhaps even complete healing isn't really possible.
Yeah, I see that as well, Aura, that this
Mhm.
is something we have to learn about and live with.
Right.
And that's not true.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, perhaps up to a while ago, I would have had some doubts. You know, I always knew that a lot of healing was possible because I'm an example of extreme healing, and a lot of people that I've been working with are examples of extreme healing or extreme healing in progress, all sorts of things. But now I really, you know, I hope I continue to say that in the future, but I don't have any doubts anymore because I've seen
Right.
it and it's
Yeah, the
possible.
difficulty from my experience, Aura, is that people don't have enough perspective on all the different features of the wound or enough technique to be able to
Mhm.
address all those different things. So some people,
Yes.
for example, might be a therapist who are really gifted with emotions. And so they help the person experience these disowned negative emotions really thoroughly, but they don't know how to deal with the parts or the beliefs or the
Mhm.
memories, right? So you need, it takes a really comprehensive approach to
Yeah.
address all the different dimensions of the wound before it will transform. And when it does, the psyche becomes unlocked in an amazing way because we're
Mhm.
locked in. We're locked into a particular
Yes.
mode by that wound. And when that wound transforms, suddenly much of the ego structure becomes very malleable and variable in a way that it normally isn't. And you
Right.
can really redesign your psyche in very fundamental ways once a core wound has been cleared.
Yeah. So perhaps we can finish with, yeah, it's work. It isn't easy. It's
A lot of work.
challenging, and often we need a lot of help on the way. But also, as we get help, we become, hopefully, little by little. It can take a few years at least, but little by little we become experts on ourselves, and then we, you know, we may become really good healers of ourselves, and and we may have, you know, these instincts that also help us know when to seek help and which help to seek, you know. So it's kind of a combination of finding those things that are right for us to study or to do, but also becoming really good at understanding ourselves, one step at a time, another step. And then, you know, we become um, how would I say, um, self-healers, uh, um,
Self-lovers.
self-lovers, guides, you know, supporters, coaches, and all that stuff for ourselves. That's really, really cool. It's a great feeling of achievement and independence when you can do that. And once again, it doesn't mean that you don't get help when you need it. You know, that's the wise thing to do. You just suddenly you realize, here I need some help. So I go and figure out what would help me. I'm saying this again because I heard from a few people that I was misunderstood in this regard, as if I thought that we're not supposed to get help. No, not at all. You know, no such
Lots of
thing.
help required. Yeah.
Right, right. And it's lovely when we work together and we can also start helping each other as friends and as kind of, you know, not only as uh, professionals, but to just really help each other on the way. It's really
Yeah.
cool.
Or and I have been buddies and helped each other out for years. So
Absolutely. Lucky us. Yes. So, Tim, any closing words?
are we wrapping up now? Are we doing Q&A? What's next on the agenda?
Well, it's we've been going on for an hour and 15. Do you have some more time?
I've got a little more time. Yeah.
Okay, cool. I thought you needed to go. So Q&A. Anybody has a question or comment?
I see Rena says that it's also a lot like theta healing. I don't know enough about theta healing to
Me neither.
confirm or deny that statement. I know a tiny bit about it, not enough to say anything coherent or intelligent.
And Rena is asking if that's your upcoming course. I don't know which
Whose
one of
course?
the
Yeah, right.
things,
Do I?
you know.
I don't think I have an upcoming course. I might actually do something in Israel soon.
Oh,
Some kind of webinar about purpose or something like that, where we would be connecting to these entities that know your purpose. Oh, it looks like Rena raised her hand. She might want to talk. Just unmute yourself and talk, Rena.
I'm trying. I actually just meant to write that. I meant Aura's course. Is she going to do that? Clear all my limiting beliefs in the upcoming course?
Rena, you come in the first day and I have this wand and I just do this and it just poof, it all goes away.
I can even bring my own wand.
Cool. So you don't need to come to the course.
The course is coming to me. I don't actually need to come to the course.
Right. We're going to have an exciting course that's an advanced course that has to do with transformation of parts in all sorts of various ways, and also healing the past in all sorts of various ways, and some other stuff. It's going to be fun. So did you have a question, Rena?
No, I was just very excited about the...
Yeah, it looks like a couple of people are into that belief thing. They want the clear all of my limiting beliefs. I'll take one of those, please. Yeah, I don't think we have any of that upcoming yet, but noted that there's some demand for that one.
Or please make note. Yes.
Okay. Anything else? Anybody want to say something or ask something? Or Rena, do you have anything else you wanted to ask?
I think they understood everything we said and have no questions. So
okay, so to work.
Yeah, I just want to say something. I want to say thank you, Tim and Aura, for doing this webinar and the others that you've done. Aura, I think it's wonderful that you're doing it. I want to thank you a lot for it. I enjoy it. I listen to it. I'm not always able to be live with you, but I love it that you record so I can listen. It's really extremely interesting. Yay. Extremely interesting. And I loved it that the team mentioned we can actually use help from higher sources. I loved it that you spoke about it, and it kind of encouraged us to do it, to use.
They're just waiting by the phone. They don't get a lot of calls.
Yeah, I know. They really love it when we ask for help. So I loved it that you said it here as well. And thank you for reminding this as well. And yeah, I miss you guys, and I really appreciate the work that you do. Thanks.
Thanks, Rothen. It's so good to see you. It's been a long while, too long.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hope to see you soon. Okay. Any more? Any comments, questions?
Irit asked for more examples.
Oh.
What do you think? I can give yeah, I don't know what, but I can give some examples of core wounds I've cleared.
Oh, cool.
That could be fun.
You're talking about your own core wounds.
Yes, mine. So the big one, as I mentioned earlier, was my dad was very critical and would find fault with many of the things that I did. And so when I was 6, I decided that I was going to learn everything and be good at everything, and that way he wouldn't be able to criticize me anymore. This is how core wounds form when we're young, so they're done with the thinking of a child. They're done in crayon, and very sweeping, these decisions. So I proceeded to read the dictionary and memorize. I can still remember like 3 different kinds of columns and stuff from reading through this Webster's dictionary when I was 6 years old. And my memory is really good for facts, not for people's names, but for facts and information. I have an amazing memory because from a young age, I devoted myself to remembering everything. So anytime I was asked a question, I would have the correct answer. So this was probably the largest wound in my psyche. When I pulled this one out, the whole ego kind of went. I had to redesign it and rebuild it. Another one was a wound with my mother, where I was maybe 4, and she was going around doing all sorts of different stuff for different people, and I kept asking her why she was doing it. And I wasn't satisfied with the answers. This is a normal behavior for a 4-year-old. Why? Llama, 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 llama. Right. So what I figured out though was that the adults had no idea what they were doing, and they were making it up as they were going along. And this was a big problem for a 4-year-old.
Very worrying.
16-year-old, that's a normal thought. Wait a minute, I've been listening to my parents all this time. They don't know what they're doing. That's a good teenager thought. That is not a good 4-year-old thought.
Yes.
That created another core wound. That one actually led to the true purpose process. Because I was like, okay, this is not cool that there's no plan and no purpose. I have to fix the universe. And eventually, when I was 41, I finally came up with a strategy. Now, this is all unconscious, right? I didn't know that this was why I was doing it. But when I was 41, I figured out, aha, I can find the purpose of everything. And then it'll all make sense. And there'll be a plan. And it'll be okay, right? This was a 4-year-old, actually a 6-year-old part of me that had taken on the task of fixing the universe and waited for 35 years to come up with a strategy to do it.
I don't think I've ever heard that story, Tim. Fascinating.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. Wow. And it's also a good example of how core wounds don't only cause us a lot of pain and trouble, but they also drive us to all sorts of
we develop all of our gifts in reaction to these core wounds, for sure, right? I mean, I can't tell you how many times, like, I'm working with some high-powered CEO who admits that his dad told him he'd never amount to anything, and he's been trying to prove him wrong ever since, right? And now here's this towering company with tens of thousands of employees and producing all these goods and services and stuff out of this guy's, emotional abuse from his dad, right? A lot got done because of that wound.
Sometimes too much got done.
Sometimes too much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I don't see any more questions.
Right.
People look pretty happy though.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, all of you, for coming.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your joining us. And Tim, thank you so much for joining from the other side of the world.
Always delighted to chat with you, Aura.
Yeah, me too. And we'll probably meet again next Monday. I think the next episode of my series is going to be named The Loving Detective, the Sensitive Spy. So we'll
she says
talk
she
about
thinks so because she's waiting to see if the larger forces have any better ideas for her. I know how she thinks.
Yeah, I like to keep options open. True, so true. Okay, so thanks a lot, and much love to you all, and much love, Tim, and see you soon.
Virtual hugs for everyone and all your parts.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.